Michael, it's good to have you here. You have an interesting story about methods that you found useful in speaking to church members about stewardship in your early ministry days. Would you like to share that with us?
I would be happy to. As a young pastor, I was wrestling with how to deal with this question from the beginning, and I was kind of in a district, a couple hundred miles away from anyone else. I didn't have people to really talk to much, and I just studied it out from the Bible, best I could, from the Spirit of prophecy. But I realized that, well, tithing is not a test of fellowship. It is not an optional thing either. And I struggled with how to make that practical in the ministry. And in my visitation, which is also key to pastoral ministry, I didn't visit just for stewardship questions, but in my visitation, those that I suspected by looking through the records that maybe there was an issue of faithfulness. And I didn't just jump to see if they missed 1 month. I waited 6 months or 9 months. But when I visited in the home, I found that, after making some inquiries about their family and their children and how things were going, and, that maybe they're dealing with some issues, maybe sicknesses or whatever. At one point, I would say, I would ask them a question, just simple. I said, can you help just to reassure my mind? Are you returning a faithful tithe? Are you being honest with God?
And what was the kind of response you would get?
I would say in 99.9% of the cases, the response was a sigh, looking down at their feet for half a minute, and then they would raise their head and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not being faithful. And I could see the pain, the burden on their hearts, and I'd say something like this: Would you like to be rid of that burden tonight? Wouldn't you like to, know that from today forward that load is lifted? And you could see, oh, I would love that. So I would say, would you be willing to make a commitment by God's grace from today forward? You're going to return an honest tithe. And they sometimes would say, well, but I don't have enough money to go around, and I don't have enough to cover the bills, and I have this debt, and yes, there are issues we may need to help them with on financial management.
Yes.
But in the end, I said, yes, all those are needed, but it's most important to be faithful to God first. And He's promised to help you with that.
Yes.
If you'll accept His help. Would you be willing to make that commitment? And it's not me, but the Lord is blessed. I have had the responses time and time again. Their answer was, yes, I am. I'm willing to make that commitment.
And what was the result once people started being faithful? Did you notice any difference in their spiritual life?
In almost every case, immediately I noticed that, first of all, their attendance became more regular, that when they came, there was a smile on their face. They would, like a load was lifted. They became more actively involved in the church. And just in every way, there was a tremendous improvement in what was taking place in their lives.
Well, that's wonderful. But I think the most important part of this story is that you had a relationship with your church members.
Yes, I think if I had just gone there only to visit them about are they being faithful in their tithing and stewardship, that would have been disastrous. But they were accustomed to seeing me visit homes. They were accustomed to seeing me in their home.
Yes.
And so when I ask these kinds of questions, yes, it's not comfortable for me, and it's not comfortable for them. But I've come to understand that God asks me as a pastor to ask those questions in a kind way, in a loving way, and they accept it that way.
And it's part of your ministry towards their spiritual needs.
Amen.
Yes.
It has really been helpful.
Well, thank you for sharing, and I'm sure your story will be helpful to young ministers, more experienced ministers out there. We hope that the Lord will continue to bless your ministry. Thank you.
Thank you.